everybody. Welcome to Dipped in Tone. I'm Zach, and you might notice, yet again, we can't find Rhett. I text him, and it just comes back as undeliverable. I don't know what's going on. So in lieu of Rhett, I have my dear friend, Mr. Mick Taylor. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking me on. We could pretend I'm Rhett, maybe.
Yeah. See, well, we just had Joey on, and I said he just needs to like puff his hair out. So could you go like make it kind of into a fro or something real quick?
Make it bigger. Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. So how have you been? It's been a while.
It has been a while. I don't think I've seen you in person, Zach, since you were here with Morgan and Graham.
Yes.
And that must be, well, at least 3 years ago, because it was before the boringness of COVID. So
it was literally I left March 8th, I think, from England. So it was right before lockdown kind of started. So we kind of felt like we dodged a bullet. But yeah, I was thinking about that on the drive to work today because Graham was he was so little and he just like played on the farm that you guys are next to and stuff. And it was our favorite part of our trip over there was coming to hang with you guys. It was a blast.
Oh man, it was a good day. So what, he's now lending you money and buying you beers? Is that how that works?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I'm hoping he has like his little cash, his where anytime he gets Christmas money or something, he has a little box he puts all his money in. And every time we're like, oh, we're going to go, run around to the store. And he's like, I want to buy something. It's like, no, you don't need anything. He's like, I have money. And he'll like run upstairs. Like, no. But yeah, so basically, we're just going to have a conversation, hang out, going to talk about things to try not to keep it too boring for you. Because I'm sure being in the community that we're in, we answer a lot of the same questions over and over and over again.
You know what? One of the questions that Dan and I get asked, and I'm sure you get asked all the time as well. It's like, don't you ever get bored of talking about this stuff? And I'm like, no, right. Until someone stops asking which order should I put my overdrive pedals in, how can I get a good sound at low volume? They're the same questions day in, day out, and they're the same questions that we had when we were just starting out, and we still have the same questions, and it never gets boring because the answers morph and change, and you learn more. And just before we kick off, that's the thing that I find so amazing about all of this, even as immersed in it as we are. You still keep learning every time we plug in, every time we turn the cameras on, we learn something, and I love that. So it can never be too boring for me.
Okay, well, good. Well, before we get started, I have to thank our patrons on Patreon. So thanks to everybody for supporting the show. If you want to join the community, go to patreon.com/dippedintone, and you can learn all about the tiers and whatnot. And then we have our sponsor of the episode, which is Sweetwater. And for Sweetwater, Rhett and I are doing a giveaway, and I want to share with you the rigs we have chosen. And I just want to I'm not going to tell you whose is who, and I want to see which one that you like, because Rhett and I have an argument. So basically, we have two rigs. Yeah. One of which is a classic Vibe Telly, a Blues Junior, a Behringer Octaver, kind of like a POG sort of thing, the JHS 3 Series Fuzz, and then the smaller Boss Space Echo, the new one. And the other rig is a PRS SE semi-hollow, a D&M drive, a flashback, TC Electronic flashback, and then the Supro Delta King, one of the smaller Supro amps. So between those two, which one would you go for, Mick?
I like them both. I've got to say, I like them both. There's a good bunch of variety on the first board. The PRS semi-hollow sounds kind of cool. Because I'm, as you viewers of the show will know, that Dan's a telly guy. I do love tellies, but I don't get to play them so much. I like the simplicity of the second rig. And what did you say? The first amp was a Blues Junior, and the second one was the Supro Delta King. Yeah, is the Supro Delta King like 10-inch speaker?
I think that this one might be the bigger one. It might have a 12.
Bigger one.
I'm not entirely sure.
If it's the bigger one, I'm going with the second rig.
All right. And it has a D&M drive, so
Yeah, well,
hello.
obviously.
Well, to learn more about that, you can go to sweetwater.com/dippedintone, check it out, enter to win, and shop on Sweetwater while you're there too. But let's just get started. So the first question I wanted to touch on was, how does it feel to have such a profound effect on the community as a whole when you guys feature something that, I know for me, it happened and it felt like it set the world on fire. But when you guys show stuff, it can just completely change a builder's life or get the entire community talking. And how does that feel to have that sort of effect?
If you think about it, if we actually acknowledge that that does happen, then it's heavy.
Yeah.
Because you know that anything you say could be, as you say, can have huge effects. So I guess what we try and do, I think one of the reasons that of the handful of channels that have that kind of effect, one reason that TPS has it is because we don't think about it, and because we only ever do what we want. We only ever feature the stuff we genuinely like. So if it does have an effect, it feels like an effect that is in some way, it's a cliched word, but in some way authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not done, it's not contrived, it's not paid for, it's not done because somebody's paying us to say it. It's done because we both have a genuine love of this thing. And I think that's what translates. It's that, well, we're all the same, right? We're all completely nuts about guitar tones and guitars and pedals and amps and all of that. And the whole point of TPS right at the beginning is for an outlet for Dan and I to be able to do that, because we both work in the industry, or we both have worked in the industry all our working lives. And it's quite hard to have that just, in a way, no holds barred outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, as a former magazine journalist, you had to be very careful what you said on magazines. And certainly on the kind of magazines that I worked for, the brand was everything. To have a personal opinion was not really allowed or required. You were representing the brand. So if you think about it, it's heavy. And if it might hurt somebody's business, then I guess that's why we don't feature stuff that we hate or that we wouldn't choose to use. But the stuff that we would happily use and we do use and we feel passionate about, then great. If that gives someone a leg up or helps somebody sound better, happy days. It feels good in that way.
Well, I think you mentioned that you guys don't get paid for this. And I think that's something that everyone might not know, that, there's so many gear channels and a lot of them are paid, and, that's fine. That's their business. That's how they survive. But you guys just get, when I was there, the amount of gear that was just laying around that wasn't even in the studio part of the building was just remarkable. But the fact that you only feature stuff that you enjoy, there have been times where I've watched you guys and it's like, oh, I can tell that's not like completely setting the world on fire, but it's also, they don't hate it. And because sometimes it's good to have the conversation, just talk about like the existence of something and, what it could be used for. But I think that the community as a whole needs to keep that in the back of their mind when they're watching this stuff, that this is not some paid sponsorship thing. The only thing that you guys are doing is sharing the gear that you get, which could you talk about that? Because I know I'll send you guys things and other people do, and it takes a while to get stuff moving just because there's so much stuff that arrives at your doorstep. Like, how often are you receiving packages?
Oh, every day. We when we first got going, I would just say as well that, of the paid channels, people who get paid to demo gear, I think they do an absolutely invaluable job.
Right.
And those who do it with integrity and, some of the people who do it are just master musicians. They're supremely creative. And I think there is a difference between a demo and a review.
Yes.
So a demo is, look what this thing can do. And if you've got someone who's creative and a great player and thinks about it out of the box or in the box, doesn't really matter. And it gives the person who's going to think about buying that pedal, it gives them a really good idea of some of the potential, because, as guitar players, what do we want? We want ideas, right? And I might be just flicking through Instagram or whatever it is, and I just get an idea. I'm like, great, awesome, that person has given me an idea. So the people who do that is extremely valuable. And I watch those channels. Sometimes if I want to see a piece of gear, I'll go to whoever it might be and enjoy that. Dan and I said right from the get-go that we wouldn't do that for a couple of reasons. One is, having been a journalist on a magazine and watched that industry become more and more corporately influenced, long story, but anyway, I just wasn't comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we just wanted to be in an environment where we could do what we wanted because we were so passionate about what we wanted. Secondly, we couldn't possibly be organized enough. Dan runs a really busy business. I was running a really busy business at the time. So it was all in our spare time. And being able to, we are both utterly, as you may well know, Zach, we are both terrible at communicating with people and keeping in touch and doing all of that. We're both completely rubbish at it. So we just didn't want the kind of, I guess, the admin of having to be on for people that we were serving.
Right.
More deeply than that, I would also say that one of the things that got really confused when I was on magazines is the who is your customer?
Right.
So for me, the customer was always the reader, because that was the person who was going into the store or buying it on subscription or however they did it and reading your stuff. So when I'm writing something, I'm writing it for them because I feel like they're my customer.
Right.
If you're being paid to do something, or if your advertising revenue is so huge that your customer starts becoming the advertiser, that creates a conflict of interest for me. And I don't think there's anything sinister in it. I don't think anyone would set out to try and mislead anybody. I think it's more about, you just get a bit confused about who your customer is. So long story short, we get sent a ton of stuff all the time. And we went through this one stage where manufacturers were sending us 2 of every single thing they did. And we had to politely go back and say, look, oh man, we're blown away by that, but we can't, A, we've got nowhere to put it, and B, it might not all be relevant to us. So, the sort of the golden standard of doing something like this is that's what we spend our days doing, is going through new gear and playing it and, being completely immersed. But as you don't spend your whole day designing pedals. You spend most of your day dealing with a paint shop problem, paying invoices. And there does come a point where some days I'll get to the end of the week and go, I haven't touched a guitar this week.
Right.
Because the admin around everything else is just to keep the thing moving, So,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I recently hired a manager. I got Matthew Timmons, who was working at Novo Guitars, and he's working for me now. Oh, cool. And it's been such a godsend not having to deal with QuickBooks every day and, chasing invoices and just like having someone to help you just remember deadlines. Cause I feel like we live in a world where these things can do so much for us. And yet it still feels like sometimes it's impossible to get anything done. So I understand.
Well, you have 2 sets of, you've got the thing that you're trying to do creatively, 3 things really. So the things you're trying to do creatively, the internal reality of making that happen. And as a business gets bigger, obviously that needs managing. And then you've got your customers who, at the end of the day, are the most important thing possible. And the amount of, you will know, selling things to people, that the amount of administration that creates alone, I don't know how many emails you get a day, but we get hundreds. And it's like, you have to put an auto reply saying, oh, look, we're really sorry, there's no way we can answer every single one of these emails. Otherwise it would take us till the end of time. So
is most of your communication from people just asking questions? Because that's like my Instagram inbox. That's where I get most of my communication, because that's where I feel like I have the largest community. But is that kind of what you guys get, just bombarded with just general conversation?
There's some stuff we don't look at all. So I don't look at Instagram messages. I just can't. We're pretty active in comments on YouTube. Yeah. So we say, look, if you've got a question about a specific video, make it in the comments. And you know how YouTube Studio works. You see the latest things that come in, so we
Yeah.
stay on that. And if someone asks a question, I would say 99 times out of 100 we answer it,
Mhm.
no matter what that question might be. What's very difficult to do in addition to that is sort of random email
Yeah.
questions about people wanting to know which overdrive pedal to buy, and you sort of have to politely reply and say, there's no way I can answer that for you. Please watch some videos
Right.
where we've asked and answered that question and come up with a conclusion. We can't tell you.
Right.
You got to try some stuff.
Absolutely. And that's the thing it's so funny is you guys, so what year is this for that pedal show? Is this the 7th year?
Seventh year. I know, we were talking about it yesterday, and
Wow.
I'm like, that it can't be true. It can't be true, but it is.
And in that time, because like I was thinking about this, recently, when you guys started, because I feel like the first video I saw was the Klon one, which was on Dan's the Gig Rig channel, which wasn't even.
Was that the one where I'm dressed up as a game show host?
No, I don't think you're sitting in like the old room and you have the Ryra
Okay.
and like
Yeah.
That was 7 years ago.
Holy moly!
And that was like one of the first ones I saw. But you guys have created this repository of videos. But when it began, it was very much a lot of comparison stuff, conversation stuff about pedal specifically, and it's evolved so much. I mean, now you have full bands, things, and stuff going on at the studio. Where do you see the channel going? And furthermore, what keeps you inspired?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So when we started, if you look at some of those old videos, we were so timid.
Yeah.
The original sort of ethos for it in a way was that Dan was sort of set up as the guy who knew everything, and I was there to probe the questions and get the information out of him, and it worked really well. And then it kind of grew into its own thing. So alongside all of that, we're learning. We're still learning all the time. Dan's been playing guitar for about the same amount of time I have, and which would be it's 40 years, for goodness sake. But Dan's just over 50. I'm just coming up to 50, and I would say I've been playing guitar seriously since I was 13 years old.
Yeah,
and not seriously since I was about 7. So. And then, of course, I walked straight out of university pretty much into a guitar-related job. So all of my serious work in life has been in and around the industry. So even with that whole back catalogue, and in my case, being able to right from the get-go, being able to be around people like Paul Reed Smith, Randall Smith at Boogie, visiting some of the world's biggest and best guitar factories, having access to those kind of people, and then latterly, guys like you and the people we've met since, it never stops. And we keep learning, and I keep having these sort of deepening of knowledge. So in terms of the actual question, where's the channel going? One of the things I feel quite passionately about is one of the things we've learned more and more and more, I guess we always knew it, but it starts to make more sense, is that whole idea of what's best and what's better is
right.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Everyone desperate to know what the best pedal is for $200 or whatever. And it's like, no, man, you've got to turn that on its head and say, what inspires you to play?
Yeah.
Because, and you got to go there to come back, look at this, it's ridiculous. And guitars and amps and all this crazy stuff. And we're in this very privileged position of being able to have gone there
right,
and come back and gone, actually, this is the stuff I really love, and try not to get too in your head about it. So if we can promote that message a little more, that makes me happy. And in addition to that, there is something slightly, it weighs heavy on you after a while, where you're staring down this lens as I am now. And it is aesthetically, and it's very different than being with human beings in a room. So
yes,
on a much lower level, we've started to do these things called experience days. We have 6 people in. They come in, they spend the whole day. We plug them into a loud amp, maybe for the first time. They get to play a vintage guitar. They can play anything they want. And some of the people that come, might just be starting out on their playing journey. I absolutely guarantee at some point in the day, they make music.
Yeah.
In whatever way makes sense to them. Might just be a few chords, might be a groove, and you can watch it happen. They're super nervous because they're around bunch of other people, and you know what it's like. You hand someone a
Oh yeah.
guitar in that environment and you just feel nervous about it. And then as those nerves drip away, Dan and I are usually on our knees trying to find a tone that's going to light them up.
Right.
And then you just see them go. You see these wings grow, and for even if it's just for a few minutes, they're lost in it.
Yeah.
And that is what inspires me at this point, is helping other people get to the, I mean, it probably sounds ridiculously altruistic, but that's what inspires me, is having more people realize, you know, if you spend 2 hours less worrying about whether you should buy a timeline or a Echo station,
Right.
and 20 more minutes just playing, your life will be better. So, and I again, to top that all off, and I'm sorry for the long answers, but
No.
I am a firm advocate of doing what you love, and being immersed in music makes the whole of the rest of your life better. So that it sounds, you know, sounds a bit heady or whatever, but that's what motivates me, is seeing people get there.
Right. And I'm sure that doing the experience days was because the same kind of thing happens for me, because like similarly we live in this box, we're making stuff, we're connecting with people, but kind of indirectly. But the moment you can sit with someone and see their face, or hear how their playing changes, or the whole vibe changes whenever they get a sound that inspires them, it just kind of brings you back to earth a bit, and reminds you why you suffer so often at your craft. When I don't know if this is anything that we ever talked about, but for me, getting started in all this part of it was very hard, because I am remarkably shy. I've gotten over it over the years because of just practice and rehearsal, really. But it took a long time for it to come natural. Was that something that you, because of your history working for magazines and whatnot and meeting so many people, did you have that comfort level already, or was it different the moment that the red light came on for you guys?
Yeah, I guess so same as you, playing in bands and stuff is one kind of confidence.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a collective confidence, because if it is a band, then you have the whole band, and there's that sort of camaraderie, and there's actual humans in the room.
Sure.
And the feedback is instant. The hard thing about online, I guess, certainly in the early days when it was much more Wild West, I mean, it still is Wild West, but was learning, how to get over that fear of just being natural, for want of a better way to put it.
Right.
Because I think what we're all doing in that moment, same as Red Light Fever, you're worrying about stuffing up, and you're worrying about people not liking you. And of course, that's a huge part of being online, as anyone who is online will know. We're super lucky. The amount of hate we get is tiny. Proportionally, it is infinitesimally small.
Right.
Maybe 1 in 1,000 comments might be slightly negative, and 1 in 5,000 might be downright unpleasant.
Right.
And that's pretty low percentage compared to some other people I know online. So learning to deal with that was probably harder than being natural on camera. But you can watch it over the genesis of TPS, where we're really super timid in the early days, and we're both really holding back on the playing because we don't want to show off. We don't want to, let go, because we don't want to be seen to be showing off and all that kind of stuff. And then I guess, like you say, with repetition and practice, you just kind of get over it. And I can't even remember who told me, but they said, look at the lens and imagine you're talking to a friend. And that still helps me. I don't know if you saw the show we did with Pete Thorne last week.
Not yet.
Okay. Dan asked Pete a question about, how does he deal with that? With let's say he was on stage with Chris Cornell or Paul Rogers from Free or Alice Cooper, and he's got to play a Soundgarden solo, or he's got to play a All Right Now solo, or he's got to play Schools Out. You stood on stage with the dude. How do you even get over that? And he says, well, if you're worried about it, it's a form of selfishness. because you're
Right.
worried about what people think of you. Much better to go, hang on, what does that guy there want from this guitar solo? What does that audience member want from this guitar solo? If I can channel that and deliver to them, it's not about me anymore. It's about channeling this thing and giving it to them. So without really knowing it, I think Dan and I have been doing that for a while. It's been thinking about what does the viewer want? You know, what do they?
Yeah.
What's going to be useful to them, rather than are they going to think I'm a, you know, insert swear word here.
You can curse, it's fine.
Can I?
Go ahead.
I'm English. It's part of our vernacular. So
Right. This next question, it may be controversial for you, but I mention this a lot about myself. When I play guitar, I tend to not really use pedals because I kind of get tired of them sometimes. I mean, I love what I make. And when I play it, I enjoy it. But most of the time when I play guitar, I just want to experience a guitar and an amp in a loud way and just connect with the air in the room. Do you ever get tired of pedals?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And funnily enough, there's been a theme in TPS over the last few months where we've been getting more amps and cranking them. Yeah. And just enjoying that, like you say. I guess the issue I have with it is where, like so many issues, it immediately becomes a false dichotomy. Mm-hmm. For example, is pedal distortion better than amp distortion? It's like, well, hang on, rewind. What we like is an amp that's on the edge and maybe just into overdrive. And then if we want to push it with a pedal or shape it in some way, you know, that's not, it's not quite as, we've created a false dichotomy here. So I enjoy the ecosystem of a whole rig, and that might change depending on your mood. And I guess once you've been playing for a while, and anyone watching this or listening to this will hopefully be able to relate. You know, it's a curve, isn't it? 1 minute I've got the most complicated board imaginable, and I even did MIDI once.
Right.
And then the next minute, I've said it a few times on the show just recently. I said to Dan, you know what? I'm just bored of overdrive pedals.
Sure.
I'm really bored of overdrive pedals. What I like is my amp cranked, and I just like hitting it with a treble booster or a booster of some other kind.
Sure.
So yeah, I do. The other thing is the fatigue of going, oh, you know, do I prefer this analog delay or that analog delay? And that does. Right. I've learned how to snap out of that now. Mm-hmm. Like A-Bing stuff constantly. It's like, no. If I just make a choice and spend 20 more minutes learning the set, the tone is going to be better for me playing better, not because I've got the right pedal on the board. So
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's so like all guitar playing, you're playing the instrument, and regardless of how incredible or complicated an effect is, if you don't know your part or don't feel inspired, then it kind of doesn't matter. But yeah. One thing that I've done over the past about a year or so, even though I have there's my 2 Rock and there's a stack of amps there, I've started to adopt recording demos digitally, using the neural plugin stuff. And I know you guys, I mean, you use digital pedals occasionally, but I feel like you have maybe not directly said it, but I feel like you would be the one to ask, like, would you ever try any of those digital amp solutions or like a plugin or something? I mean, for recording purposes?
Yeah, I tried them all. And certainly in my time as a journalist, you know, we were required to either review or certainly be across all of that stuff.
Because one thing I'm thinking about is the fact you guys really enjoy like wet dry setups, and the complexity of that in a room. I mean, it's not that, you know, it's not you're not wiring a rocket or anything. You're just hooking up amps.
Yeah,
but like something like the Quad Cortex, you know, allows for such amazing like
to
amp
do all
rigs.
of that.
Yeah.
I think it's about hours in. I certainly think that. Well, I think 2 things actually. I was going to say that beautifully well recorded and mixed, I defy anyone to really tell any difference. Where I think I can tell the difference is it's everything else that goes along with it. So the records I like, the music I like, any music that I've enjoyed making has been a collaborative effort of musicians in a room playing together.
Right.
And I still all my favorite records are usually tracked that way. The beds happen together. And I guess once you start breaking everything down to its minute constituent part and tracking everything and programming drums and stuff, for me, all the soul goes away. Now, there are people that can do it and do it, masterfully well.
Right.
But the sort of pain of having done a lot of that and then listening back and going, I'm just not really digging this. I'd rather have it played less well, but have the vibe of the take.
Sure.
And for me, that does require kind of an amp in a room sort of approach. Now, that's not saying that if I have the great luxury of having a room where we can do that. And a lot of my friends, similar kind of deal. But if you don't have that, I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever trying to mic an amp up in a compromised space, because you can't get it loud enough. The room might sound dreadful. So, of course, you're going to be better off with a solution that solves a load of those problems. For me, it's about barrier to entry. So I certainly don't have any problem with technology. I use complex software to do all kinds of things. But goodness, it takes me a long time to learn it. So learning something like Premiere for video editing or color grading, or getting around even something simple as Logic or any other recording software, to be able to work quickly and without impediment to creativity is the hard bit. We made a video on Tuesday, was it maybe? We just asking the question, what can I plug my guitar into? So thinking about when we were 8 years old or 13 years old, what's hanging around the house that I can plug my guitar into, and how can I do that? And we go through a bunch of stuff. We plug into a TV and a hi-fi system and all of that. And actually, what we discovered by the end of the video, we did invoke some modern technology, like an app on the phone, and also an amp simulation pedal. And the app on the phone, it was like, okay, need to get the guitar into the app. Oh God, I haven't got the right cable, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The guitar emulation pedal, the phone wouldn't connect to the pedal. It worked fine in the rehearsal, when we were just making sure everything worked. And then come the video, it didn't work. It wouldn't connect. And I think that's my barrier to entry with anything like that, is if the technology stops you, then it's done. It's gone for me. Right. Otherwise, I got to spend 4 weeks learning how to not get there. But that said, I've done plenty of recordings where I've had to put a layered part in, or it's been for a little jingle for somebody or something like that, and I will happily use an amp sim. Happily. Right. No point micing an amp up for that.
There's something so maybe debilitating is not the right word, but when you have to like reset your brain to like plug in, even for me, like doing videos and plugging in another camera, all the creativity just gets sapped out of me, and that I have to leave this stuff set up. And the same thing goes if I was going to mic my amps. If even it takes 5 minutes, sometimes I feel like it'll take me another half hour to get the juices flowing back to my fingers.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons we kind of ended up with this crazy setup here, was that so that we could come in, essentially plug in and turn on, hit record. And that said, when it falls flat, it are exactly what you just talked about, where something doesn't quite work, or a camera goes down, or a battery expires, or some software on a pedal doesn't work. And that's the point where you just, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you can see us both deflate when it happens. So I suppose in the interest of expediency. The other thing I would say is that, I don't do a lot of professional audio work, but I have done a healthy share in my time, and I still do a bit. If I stick a mic on a cab and I like the amp, and I like the guitar player, I never have to fix it. I never have to fix anything.
Sure.
I've had to fix so many sounds that are not done that way.
Right.
is
Right.
is the sort of most diplomatic way I can find a way of saying it.
Sure. I got a couple questions from some of our patrons. We'll do these, and we'll get into dipping the rig, and I'll give you the
Man.
explanation of what that means. But Andrew Regan asked, as someone who struggled with this, was wanting to talk about the times that, as a musician, you've fallen out of love with music, and then trying to find a way to reinvigorate that excitement and passion for it again. Is that something that you guys, or you specifically, have
big time
dealt with?
It's a great question, Andrew, and thanks for asking it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever fallen out of love with music.
Yeah,
I think music is the one thing that would be guaranteed to get me motivated again to do pretty much anything, actually. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever fall out of love with music per se. Falling out of love with playing guitar, absolutely. I go through periodic ruts. I'm in one at the moment where the last thing I want to do is play the guitar.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting because psychologically, it's interesting for me anyway, as someone who about 4 or 5 years ago had realized that I'd been suffering with long-term minor depression. And I say minor because I'd never had a full breakdown. I wasn't medicated. But it took me a long time, probably 20 years to go, actually, I'm not just feeling a bit glum today. This is a bit more than that. I discussed it with Catherine, my wife.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, thank goodness. About time. About time you realized. And I think that's why I mentioned that just briefly, as I think it plays quite heavily into my experience of falling out of love with guitar. And it's about, for me, it's about fear. It's about fear of not being good enough, and about the fear of being disliked.
Yeah.
Especially when you occupy a public position, because, again, this might be a little deeper than we're able to go in a few minutes.
Let's go.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay, as long as you're happy, I'll go into it.
Real quick, I went to school and I finished up with psychology just to figure out all the things that were wrong with me.
No way. Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm continually fascinated by it. Some sort of, amalgam of psychology and philosophy, where guitar comes partly from an ego perspective, and in some cases it comes greatly from an ego perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was and remains about ego in a lot of ways, because, the classic vision of a person stood on stage rocking a guitar, right? It's look at me, look at what I can do, look at this effect I can have on you. And you become identified with that, and it's unhealthy, or at least it became unhealthy for me. And unraveling that ego from your desire to do it has been really tough. And I'm working on that really. I work on it a lot. I still listen to stuff every day. I still have to check myself every day, and to try and find the essence of why you play. What is it? What is it about you at your core that feels the desire to do this, rather than your ego wanting to be liked? And unraveling that's been tough. Anyway, so falling out of love with it has usually because, and it's pretty harsh, right? And the day I realized that I was kind of doing this to myself was a massive slap in the face day. But I don't want to play guitar today because I'm not willing to put the work in.
Right.
And what I hear in my playing is something inferior to what I want to be hearing, which is a whole mess psychologically, because if you feel inferior or superior, that's your ego, basically. Yeah. So you've just got to put that down. And there is an English acronym, which may be true in the US as well, JFDI. You can Google it if you don't know what it means. Just do it.
Yeah.
and occupying that, getting out of your head, right, about, because the other thing your ego will do is it will construct all kinds of narrative about why you're not motivated to play.
Yeah.
I'm terrible for this. I'll be like, oh, I haven't got time. I'm too busy. I don't have the space at home to do it. You know, you'll come up with 58,000 excuses of why you don't want to play. But I think for me anyway, the bottom line has always been, I don't feel good enough and I don't want people to dislike me. And that manifests as I can't bring myself to do the work. And it's so destructive. It's so
Right.
negative, because the
Yeah.
negativity that fosters in your mind is also exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's like this downward spiral. So apologies if it sounds like a downer. The fix for me has always been pick up the guitar and play.
Yeah.
Go see a band, go see a buddy.
Sure. I remember seeing, I think it was a Tomo Fujita video years ago, years and years ago, when John Mayer visited at Berkeley or something, or it might have been some talk, and he said, you know, there's no prize for being the best guitar player.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, damn. I never thought it, because I was younger and I'd been playing guitar for, you know, way less time, and I was so obsessed with getting better and being recognized, even in the remarkably small bubble that I lived in. And when I heard him say that, it clicked something for me, that it stopped being a competition with myself, and just started, I just tried to focus on the love and enjoyment of it. But there's sometimes when I come in here and I pick up, you know, I have pretty much I have all the guitars I've ever wanted. And there's no reason for anything other than me that I sit down and I can't play them. And then some days that just happens. And for me, the best thing is just walking away. Just like, don't have it today. I don't have it. So I'm just going to listen to music or go, I don't know, watch Ghostbusters again, or do some stupid thing that I like to do to turn my brain off from it. And it resets. But I know that inner struggle that you're talking about, because I've dealt with that in so many ways in my life. Because like I said, like when I settled on psychology and I got my degree, right before we graduated, all the teachers were like, you know, you guys are just trying to figure out yourself, right?
Yeah.
I was like, well, damn, yeah, I guess we are. But I think like you have to, like in the being good enough and all that, because I feel that too. You just kind of have to remember that these people all want to hang out with us, not because of our skills, but because we're us. And that supersedes any riff or like inspiring thing that has ever come out of our hands, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can, if you look at how getting better, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to be better, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think that whole idea of improvement and wanting to improve on the instrument is perfectly healthy, but getting that into some perspective of saying, well, it's just one step. Today is this step, and I'll do it for the journey rather than the destination. Because if I'm looking at the top of the mountain the whole time and going, I still can't play Cliffs of Dover perfectly in exactly the same way Eric Johnson can, it's like, okay, well, just learn one 5-note passage then.
That's it.
And have that for today. That'll do. And chunking it in that way. And there, I think there's a slight element of getting older as well. And realizing two things for me. One, it's usually okay. It usually turns out fine. This too shall pass. I've seriously considered having that tattooed on the inside of my arm there. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
Because everything and it will be okay. It will be fine. And I don't know what, if you can just snap yourself out of that moment of feeling bad, like you say, you can just go and do something else and say, that's fine, I'll pick that up tomorrow. That might be Andrew, that might be too deep an answer for the question you asked. You might feel completely fine about all of that. And yeah, it's completely fine, isn't it, to not feel like playing a guitar today? I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The last quick question was from Matthew Dickin. He was talking about your vlogs, your guitar vlogs, and going on that journey with you. I really enjoyed the 335. I could see the absolute nightmare occurring on your face as it went on and on. But His question was, having gone down all these rabbit holes, what upgrade made the biggest or best impact on the instruments you were working on, and what would be something that you would recommend just not bothering with?
I think it's all worth it for
Okay.
the experience.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's like all things in life, right? It's not about, I'll say it again, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. It's about the learning you do while you do it, and you do it for the doing. I think there's great value in that.
Sure.
But more prosaically, the biggest effect by a million miles, I had a Chinese Epiphone Casino that I bought on eBay for a challenge.
Yep.
And the pickups had gone microphonic. I think the covers were loose. The resonant peak of it was unusable. It just sounded awful to me. And I didn't want to play it. And I changed them out for Lollas and a new loom. And that guitar will sit alongside any guitar in the studio now. And I love playing it, and it sounds great, and it's musical. So I think taking a more cost-effective guitar and really treating it to something, uptown is the most bang for buck you'll ever get. The Strat journey, swapping all the pickups in and out of my old blue Strat, was ultimately a waste of time. Because, it wasn't a waste of time because I learned what the solution was, and the solution was buy an old Strat.
Right.
Is just about the most depressing solution you can arrive at, but a lot of that is mind identified, right? So, is a listener gonna perceive that difference? Probably not.
Right.
Can I get over the fact that I probably don't perceive the difference when you're in the throes of playing? And would you just be better off playing and not doing all of that? Probably. But you've got to go there to come back. I'll say it again. And but we all create these little narratives, don't we, about why we do something or why it's worth doing. And I guess, I don't know. It's better to know than to not know. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's very true. Well, let's get into dipping a rig, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So, dipping a rig is where one of our patrons will send us a photo of their setup, preferably something they would take to a gig. And we just kind of talk about it. Rhett and I
cool. Nice.
Will offer up our suggestions, things we would change, things we don't like, whatever. It's no pressure, and everybody's in for a good time. So I've got this rig right here from Bill Craig.
Hello, Bill.
Boom. So what we've got is quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's got the big Schmidt-Array board, which I was looking through all the submissions, and I'm like, this is probably the most TPS worthy pedal board that I've seen.
Yeah.
Let's start with the guitarist. He's got a Gretsch, some sort of jet. It's a G6134T FM. Oh goodness.
FM flame maple by the
yeah. It's a flame top jet with Broadtron pickups. He's got a Silver Sky. He's got a Telly that his father made, which is super cool. And then the pedal board here is a doozy. Schmidt-Array. He's got let's see, I'm trying to find the order of everything. So he's got a JHS AB switcher, the 29 pedals Una, a Brown T4, a Jackson Bloom, a Mjolnir, a Wildwood Mjolnir, Disaster Area Loop Controller, a Schnauz Black Box. This is so much stuff. A Brown Protein, the Lightspeed, the Quad Cortex, and then in the loop of the Quad Cortex is a Layla Dual Expression pedal, the Sir Discovery, the Free the Tone Tri-Avatar, a Keeley Halo, a New Neighbor, Illumin Reverb, Jet Pedals Revelation, the Microcosm. Okay, it's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, man. That's pretty serious.
But what do you think about this? To me, it's a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because I look at a lot of this and go, wait, can't that Quad Cortex do all that stuff? But
I'm not saying anything.
Well, I know there's a difference, and I get that. But if this is your setup, then you're gigging probably through mains. He doesn't mention anything about an amplifier. It's no amps here. He's playing.
Okay, so direct, yeah.
Yeah, this is like a direct headphone solution for right now.
Yeah.
Looking at getting an amp down the road, but like if I were going to take this to a gig, I would probably omit a lot of the gain stuff. The modulation and
Yeah,
stuff I would probably keep.
I suppose it depends on the set, doesn't it? Because
Right.
the most complex boards I've ever had is where there's been a set of music and I've had to have presets for different, to try and get closer to specific tones. But I think what I'm feeling from you, Zach, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can spend too much time worrying about that. And it might be that you're trying to remember which combination of stuff to select and which preset to select, that it kind of takes
Right.
your head out of the game a little bit, and you're thinking,
Yeah.
oh, do I want the protein on this, or do I want some other overdrive?
Right.
And by the time you've thought about that, you're out of it.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
That would be my thought process. But then that's because I'm a simpleton when it comes comes to stuff like that.
So am I. And that, like, to me, I think, and this is all, like, there's nothing on here that's, all this stuff is great. Like everything, if you ditch the quad cortex entirely and ran this all into an amp with everything, all the modulation and whatnot into a loop, I mean, what could you not do? You cover everything.
Right.
But I see all this and it's like, to me, I'd want to strip it down and just kind of, because if it's all going through that quad cortex anyway, which can model the pedals and do all those things in a way, I would just get lost on this pedal board in even in a practice situation, or just, sitting at home. I would be spending way too much time with knobs and not with my guitar strings. So I would probably ditch everything but the Wildwood Mjolnir. We'll leave that one on there for whatever reason. And maybe keep the modulation and stuff and run that into the quad cortex. And I would simplify this rig up. Oh, and by the way, we give this thing a rating 1 out of 10 shoals, which is a combination of Shull and Broyles.
Oh, nice.
And so I'll give this a rating. I love the guitars. I think that covers a lot of sonic ground, those three instruments. Yeah. But because of it's a bit overkill on the drive part of it, in my personal opinion, I'm going to give it 8.5 shoals.
Okay. I guess for me, with the quad cortex, does the quad cortex analog drive through?
I think so. Yeah, they sound remarkably good. It's I know it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, if you drink the Kool-Aid, you tend to evangelize for these things. And I've played them. I use the neural stuff for doing all my demos, and it really boggles my mind how good it sounds, because it's not as much of this sounds like a recorded guitar sound, which I think most modelers have that, like, oh, this sounds finished. Yeah. These things sound like an amp in another room, sort of thing.
Yeah. We've had a couple through here, and each time we've taken them off and plugged the dude into amps, and they've taken them off their boards. So
right.
But that
like
always
plugging
happens.
it into an amp, I think, is a totally different.
Yeah, when anyone comes here, that always happens. There, we get one thing. Anyway, I won't go down that road. Yeah, I'm gonna. If you took the neural off, for me, it's 9. If you leave the neural on, it's 3. Sorry.
Damn.
I can't get out. I just can't.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Shots are fired, because here's the thing, and here's my plea. I steam trains, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think steam trains occupy an important part of railway development, because they were extremely important in making things happen. And there are steam train enthusiasts who feel good about, putting coal in the thing and firing it up and going up a line. And it might be that they're not going to carry very many people around anymore. But without them, we don't know what the history was. And it's just, actually, this analogy isn't very good because the bullet train is supremely, it's just better in every way. I feel like a bit like a steam train enthusiast, because I feel like the further we go down this road, the further rock and roll dies.
Right.
And that is not to say that rock and roll should not morph into something different, better, because that's what's happened, right? You rewind to the turn of the century, or the turn of the 20th century. We went from gut string parlor guitars to X-braced steel string guitars to amplified steel string guitars to loudly amplified steel string guitars, and off we went, and all the musical changes that took. Brilliant. I personally have no interest whatsoever in seeing music develop beyond 1997, 6. Because I don't think it changed after that. I don't think it changed. I think what happened was, and there are artists that are out today that I love to the bottom of my heart, who are essentially doing a revoiced version of what was then.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's got any better since then. I certainly don't think there's been any better guitar sound created that wasn't available in the early 90s.
Right. I think,
and I feel like someone has got to stand up and say, if somebody doesn't protect it, it's going to go away. And I'm happy to be that hat wearing beacon of ridicule that might be the last man standing.
No, I don't think, for anyone that loves guitar, the moment you play a real amp, a loud amp, it'll change your life. I remember exactly when it happened to me, but I think that what we're going to see is just, the accessibility of good tone is just, we've seen it in the past, it's since I started playing guitar 20 something years ago. It's remarkable how immediate someone can get a good sound now when they first start, which was not the case then. Which is funny because when guitar became hyper popular in the 50s and the electric guitar, your beginner rig is the thing that we all covet now. But I'm on both sides of the fence, because I would never choose to plug into the Helix or the computer given the opportunity. But I know that opportunity for most people going forward is going to fade. And let's face it, until, the tube is it's not going to last forever. It never will. So it's an interesting thing to think about how, how finite this sort of technology is. But I totally understand being a bastion of keeping these things hot. And I respect it.
I'm not that worried about the future of technology and the availability of tubes, because there's going to be enough around to see you and Graham and probably Graham's grandkids.
Right.
If we're still allowed to plug into tube amps, for that. I guess I come from a point of, I go to so many gigs and I just feel sad with what I hear. Over processed front of house. The guitar player steps up to take a solo. Either front of house forgets to put them up, or the sound is so thin and brittle and lacking in any mid-range you can't hear them anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just countless gigs I go to where I see that, especially this world of IEMs where, and I get that, every major touring artist in the world, it's not an attack on IEMs. It's saying that done badly is much worse than the other alternative, because what you get is everyone in their own little world.
Yeah.
You get a disconnection of musicians, and you just get this odd thing where I would honestly rather they just played the record instead of trying to make it sound like the record and feel like the record.
100%.
So I do stand up for rock and roll and for ensembles of people who play together as a band and are willing, where the front of house is willing to work with the on-stage sound. And to me, it's not like you mustn't do it the other way. I guess what I'm saying is that's where I feel my connection with music, again, that is transformative, that is that kind of sacred place of the reason I love this thing so much. It's when a group of people end up doing that together.
Yeah.
So I don't think maybe the things aren't mutually exclusive. I'm saying I see it more when that's the scenario.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. And it's funny, you know, it's like it's something that can help us so much can become this weird crutch for so many.
Yeah.
But anyway,
what overdrive pedal should I use tonight? Yeah.
So you just have too damn many. You just gotta get them out of there. Just get them out of there. How often do you like shuffle the deck on the wall?
Funnily enough, we were talking about doing it just recently. I've rearranged my side of the wall yesterday because we got people coming in tomorrow, and it was a bit of a mess. Dan's side replicates Dan's brain, which is my brain's in straight lines.
Mm-hmm.
Dan is well, not straight lines.
Spaghetti on a plate.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Well, I think that just about covers it. Again, check out the Dipped in Tone Patreon. You guys, you have a Patreon, correct?
We do, yeah. Patreon.com/thatpedalshow.
There you go. So go check
we
that
do
out.
We do monthly giveaways, actually, and we put out a podcast of our comments and questions show, which happens most Mondays. So yeah, patreon.com/thatpedalshow. And
then you have your retail outlet stuff. You want to plug that real quick?
Thatpedalshop.com in the US and Canada. Fast and free shipping to the lower 48. All kinds of stuff. Thatpedalshowstore.com. But this is your thing. Please sign up to Zach and Rhett's Patreon and do all of that, please.
Wherever Rhett is, we don't even know. Also, big thanks to Sweetwater for sponsoring this episode, and don't forget to go to sweetwater.com/dipped-in-tone, and check out the giveaway. You know, you can decide for yourself which rig is better. We'll see. But Mick, thank you so much for having a conversation. I appreciate you going deep. I think the community needs that. Sometimes we often just get lost in this, like, everything's great and all pedals rule and we're all happy, and that's not true. We're all people, and like we should be able to talk about all the things that we deal with, and I think that's fantastic. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate you and what both you and Dan do for the guitar world as a whole. It's awesome.
Likewise, man. Likewise. It's a pleasure to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you later.